As I said in my opening statement, Attorney General, I'm very concerned about what happens to the level of support in the Crime Victims Fund. Senator Leahy and I sent you a letter in March on this issue after your confirmation as Attorney General, and I know we're both, as is the committee, very interested in the steps that the department has taken to address the level of funding in the Crime Victims Fund and how you see that moving forward.
So I appreciate both the letter and the questions that you and I were able to discuss yesterday. I have a personal commitment to that fund. That's the fund that provided the money for Oklahoma City victims. So I know full well how important it is to everyone who's a victim of this kind of crime or of any crime. So I have looked into it, and I have been given to understand that given the receipts we expect to bring in this year and through FY22, at the end of 2022, we should have about a $400 million balance. That is, we do not expect the fund to run out, and we expect to have a balance. Now, I also agree with you, we ought to build up that fund further. So we're going to be looking in the Department of Justice into ways to do that. I understand there is some legislation pending, possibly adding additional crimes that would feed into the fund. And of course, we'll look into also other issues that you raised about taking certain kinds of pleas and taking certain kinds of delayed pleas that might have not resulted in restitution. The most important thing in these matters is for there to be sufficient restitution for the victims.
And as the result of the pandemic, have there been more requests for assistance from the fund over this last year? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the answer. All I do know is that we expect that the receipts that we have received already to be sufficient to provide the $400 million, but I don't know the answer. That's a very good question.
Perhaps you could find that out
Absolutely.
And share that with the committee. That would be interesting to know.
Absolutely. My staff will get back to yours.
Thank you. The other question we discussed in our phone conversation was the request for the Bureau of Prisons. And as you know, the practice known as augmentation is something that this committee has been concerned about for a while. It's certainly something I hear about from prison employees in New Hampshire. And so can you tell us what the department is doing to address and curtail augmentation?
Yes, I have to admit that was a word I had never heard of before I became Attorney General.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So I have looked at this, and I am, of course, concerned about this. It's protection of both the staff and the inmates require that we have the right number of staff in the Bureau of Prisons. So what I understand is that we are currently at 95% of authorized positions filled. So there will always be a percentage because of attrition, et cetera, but they have made dramatic increases in the number of hires to the point that BOP hired 900 net new staff, counting for attrition, since last May and since the previous May, and 281 net new hires in this past month alone. Now, it will likely always be the case that we won't get up to the full numbers, but the idea with augmentation is that people who switch into guard work or protective work have already been trained in that. We're not going to be sending people who are without the training. We also expect, of course, that with the number of inmates reduced, that we will have less of a problem of the kind that you described.
I certainly hope so. I know that vaccinations have been a concern with some of the employees and corrections officers in our prison in New Hampshire. Do you have any idea if that's been an issue in other prisons around the country?
Yes, so it certainly was an issue everywhere around the country, not only in prisons, but in the community as a whole. And I've looked into that as well. So with respect to inmates, 95% have been offered vaccines. Now, unfortunately, as with the community as a whole, not everyone accepts, but as of right now, at least 52% have received at least one vaccine dose. With respect to the Bureau of Prison staff, 100% have been offered vaccines, 51% are fully vaccinated, and another 661 have received, in addition to that, have received their first vaccine dose. So we're in the right direction here. There is the same problem that there is in the community at large, some resistance to this, which frankly I do not understand. I rushed out to get my vaccine as soon as it was available. But right now we have enough vaccines for everybody who is willing to take it.
And is there any consideration around trying to better engage with staff, and I assume inmates, but particularly staff, around why this is important and the difference that it can make for them?
Absolutely. Education on this issue, as with the CDC's general effort to educate the general population, is ongoing, and we don't want this to be a problem, obviously, for the protection of our staff and for our inmates, and so we're going to do everything we can to induce people, incentivize people to take the vaccines.
Thank you very much.